This is the Fuji X100V, the camera that went viral on TikTok, sold out, and tripled in the price on the used market almost overnight last year. And here's why it's still the most cinematic photography camera that you can buy in 2024. It is so hard to believe that this camera came out nearly 4 years ago. For one, because, well, it looks like a camera straight out of the 1970s or 80s. But also the fact that it still looks pretty relevant to the rest of Fujifilm's lineup in 2024. The V is actually the 5th camera in the X100 series. The original came out all the way back in 2011. The crazy thing is, they all look pretty similar. Kinda like how most Sony cameras have more or less looked the same since the original A7. But this retro styling is only the outer layer of this absolutely charming little camera. Have you ever heard the phrase, jack of all trades, master of none? Well, the X100V kind of fits that bill. This camera is sort of the camera for every situation. In any other camera review, you'd probably be hearing this flurry of specs right now, like eye detection, BSI, autofocus, articulating screens, but not with this camera. You see, the beauty lies in its simplicity. The X100V is a rangefinder style mirrorless camera with a fixed, non-interchangeable 35mm full-frame equivalent prime lens. In plain speak, it's got one lens, it's small, you can't zoom in or out. It does have excellent low-light capabilities though, with an aperture opening up all the way to f2. Personally, I tend to gravitate toward higher focal length lenses like the 85 and 55mm, so I was kind of skeptical when I first picked this camera up. But about a week later, I was on the train into the city and I took this photo and it absolutely blew me away. This quickly became my absolute favorite camera for photography. The key to what makes these photos so organic and just frankly magical is something called film simulations, and this is what sets Fujifilm apart from other manufacturers. There are about 17 of Fuji's 19 total different film simulations built into this camera by default. And they aren't just like filters like you get on some cameras out of the box, like the Dream filter or, whatever. These are actually really detailed and as close to film as you can get with a digital camera. But by far the most fun part of this camera is the fact that you can actually add your very own film simulations to this camera. These homemade simulations are called recipes, and there's an entire online community dedicated to making these recipes as accurate and creative as possible. The main source of these is a website called Fuji X Weekly, which I'll also link below. Here are a couple of my favorites I've tried so far. Not only do these photos look gorgeous, but they were an absolute blast to shoot. There's something about all of these buttons and their tactile feel that just makes shooting on this camera such a pure joy. And I actually really grew to love the 35mm focal length on this camera. It's wide enough to tell more of the surrounding narrative, but not so wide as to completely lose focus on your subject. And don't let this vintage look fool you. The X100V still packs quite a punch with plenty of up-to-date tech and features. The 26-megapixel sensor is backside illuminated, which makes it sharp and great in low light. It features a very quick autofocus with eye detection, and you see this screen? Yeah, it articulates. Also, it has an internal ND filter, which none of my other cameras even remotely in this price range have. The C70 that I'm shooting on right now, which is like, what, $6,000 retail, has a couple ND filters, but this little original $1,400 retail camera has a 4-stop ND filter. That's ridiculous. If you don't know what that means, basically this camera has like a little sunglasses shade that goes over the lens so you can still shoot without having to crank your shutter or mess with your aperture in daylight. But if I haven't already made it clear, this camera is not about trying to do it all. It's about something much more simple, fun. As someone who mainly does video full-time and owns 2 cinema cameras, the X100V is the first camera to reignite a passion for photography I seem to have lost over the years. It really makes me feel like a kid again when I got my first Nikon DSLR all those years ago. It's this newfound creative fervor that's got me out of the house doing street photography and portraits again for fun, for the first time in like what feels like years. And the quality is just there to the point where if I were to get a legitimate narrative photography assignment or gig from a publication, I would probably shoot all or at least most of it on this camera. Couple that with the fact that the used prices for this camera are finally coming down again from their astronomical highs, and that makes this the perfect everyday carry camera. For the most part, this has been my only camera I've had in my backpack when I've been going out for fun the past week. I've talked on this channel before about how gear doesn't matter to a certain extent, but certain cameras like this really are a kind of cheat code with the sensor and the color science, especially when you pair it with good composition and years of experience. Or if you're just starting out and want to have fun and not worry about having to edit all the raw files, this is a phenomenal choice. This camera really is a cheat code for the creative mind. It's just so easy to take great images and to tell great stories with this camera. And that's why even 4 years later, the X100V is still so special. I've included links to a few of these film recipes that I love using with this camera below, as well as a few previous X100 cameras you can get for a little bit cheaper than the V. With all that being said, that's going to be all for today's video. Did you enjoy this video or find it helpful? Leave a like down below and let me know. Do you own one of the X100 cameras? Do you have a favorite film recipe that I should try? Leave a comment down below and let's have a chat about it. And if you want to hear more from me, definitely consider hitting that big red subscribe button and bell notification icon next to it so you can always be in the know when I upload new videos. And as always, see you in the next one.